We do have time for a few questions if any students would like to ask a question.
Recently, you appeared on the NewsHour, Jim Laird, and you talked a little bit about separating politics from your decisions in law. And I want to ask if that applies to the entire Supreme Court justice and how that works and how the dynamics work and how you separate your political opinions from your opinions in law.
That's a really good question, because I think it's an important question, because I think if you ask most Americans, I'll tell them, 40% of our decisions are unanimous. The 5-4s are about 20 to 25%. It's not always the same 5 and the same 4. And they'll still say, yeah, but it's the most visible, the most politically significant, and don't you decide those, and what they're really thinking is you decide them just by politics. We're sort of junior league politicians. I say, no, that's not the way it seems to me. And they look skeptical. I say, but what, It would make sense for us to decide things politically. The whole nature of the job is that we have these things which are going to be unpopular, which would be a stupid thing to do politically, and we do a lot of that. Or then I might say, which is true, I might say judges are terrible politicians on top of everything else. If we decide things by holding our finger up to the political winds, we'll get it wrong every time. But I think the best way to understand it is politics. Politics, I worked for a time, I worked for Senator Kennedy for a while. I loved doing that. I was the chief counsel of the Judiciary Committee. I got a little exposure. Politics is who's popular. Democrat, Republican, Senator so-and-so, Congressman so-and-so. What's the polls say? That's politics. And really, in that sense, I don't see it. I haven't seen politics like that enter a decision. Not even Bush v. Gore, but that would take time for me to explain that to you. But I think I can convince you. But there's something else, you see, what you're driving at, and that I think we call ideology. Ideology. Are you an Adam Smith free enterpriser? Are you a Maoist, Zhou Enlai, struggle session, troublemaker? What's your ideology? Now there, I think if I find myself deciding, because I think it's just generally good for people on some ideological basis, I think I'm doing the wrong thing. I can't say that never enters, but I think people try hard not to have it enter. Now there's a third thing, and the third thing we all have. We all have our lives. We've all, after a time, had an education of some kind. You've been here. I was at high school in San Francisco. I grew up there. I went to Lowell and was a lawyer for a long time, law teacher. And people who've been in a field for a while, and you do as you get older, you develop views. You have sort of personal views of what the country's like, of what law is like, if you're a lawyer, how law relates to individuals in the country, of sort of basic jurisprudential, philosophical ideas of how law really ought to work. And people sometimes have different ones, and those differences exist. Those differences exist. And I think that explains a lot of the differences that come out in the opinion. And the more you know about it, the more wrong it seems to be to call that politics. When I see people in the court with different sort of basic philosophical views of law and how it relates to the country, I think, well, it's because in part we're there for a long time. We can serve for our whole lives if we want to. And different presidents appoint different people, and they don't always get people who agree with them on everything, but they might get people that have sort of certain philosophies that are somewhat similar. And I think it's not a bad thing. It's a big country, 300 million people. It's a good thing that people in that court have different views, because people in the country have different views, sort of basic different philosophical views. So as I said, given where I grew up, given that I lived most of my life on the East Coast, I thought I'd seen a lot of people who disagreed with me. But I didn't know how much disagreement there could be till I moved to Washington. And then there was a lot. And as I say, fine, fine. It doesn't hurt me to have people on the court who have really different views. And that's just fine. I can learn something from them, and maybe they can learn something from me, and we'll try to, as best we can, to work things out together. That's how the country should work, and it has to work that way. if we're going to have a country where 300 million people try to resolve differences under the law that they themselves create through some kind of democratic process? Good question. It's a hard answer.